Hello, welcome back. Let's get more on our top story. Manchester United are in talks with Sporting over Ruben Amorim becoming their new manager. The news about United's approach for Amorim came less than 8 hours after Erik Ten Hag was sacked by United following defeat to West Ham. The club have won just one of their last 8 games and they're 14th in the Premier League table.
Erik Ten Hag was not expecting to be relieved of his duties when he turned up for work at United's Carrington training ground this morning. I think his feeling was that the performance, particularly in that first half at West Ham, showed what he's been saying for a long time. It's been missed chances that have led to a disappointing set of results to start the season. He was a man who has told us to believe in the process, and I think he felt that the number of glaring opportunities his players passed up, coupled with that controversial VAR decision that gave West Ham all of the points, shows that it was down to the way the players performed on the pitch rather than any mistakes he made on a managerial level. But we're told he accepted the news with dignity when he sat down with Sporting Director Dan Ashworth and the Chief Executive Omar Barada. The club's hierarchy unanimous in their decision that this was the end of the road for Ten Hag as United manager. 14 matches into a season, including the Community Shield, where United have only won 4 games. Not good enough, and they're not seeing the progress which they feel they should be at this stage, especially when you consider the investment in the squad that took place in the summer once Ten Hag had signed that contract extension.
Manchester United's players have reacted to the sacking of Ten Hag. The captain, Bruno Fernandes, posted online, "Thank you for everything, boss. I appreciate the trust and the moments we shared together. I wish you all the best in the future, even knowing the last period hasn't been great from all of us. I hope you fans can keep with you the good things the manager has done for our club." He wasn't alone. Lisandro Martinez says, "Thanks for the trust you placed in me, coach. It's not the end we hoped for, and we're really feeling it because responsibility is always shared. But we hold on to the great memories of Wembley and your passion for United. Good luck and every success in the future." Rasmus Hojlund, who Ten Hag bought for £72 million, posted, "Thanks for everything, boss. Wish you all the best in the future." And Ten Hag gave Kobbie Mainoo his Manchester United debut, and he has said, "Thank you for your trust and belief in me, for giving me the opportunity to play for my boyhood club. I wish you all the best for the future." And Luke Shaw hasn't played this season, but he said, "Days like today are not nice or easy, but I'm grateful for what we achieved together. I want to say thank you and wish you all the success for the future, boss."
The big shock for me is just how bad they've been with the new signings that have come in. And the fact they're in 14th is just unacceptable. You can't be in 14th after nearly 9-10 games, really, with the level of spend that's occurred without being under significant pressure, and that's what's happened. I think the lack of identity and style is something that's been a mystery for the last 2.5 seasons, really, because even with, let's say that the recruitment's been poor, which it's been awful at times. I was shocked to see Eriksen and Casemiro in central midfield and Agati on the bench. You know, Agati was brought in as being the sort of successor to Casemiro, and I would be asking questions around that as an owner. And I think that the lack of style of play has been the biggest problem, and the lack of progression in the performance levels. But they're better than 14th, and they're better than probably 6th. You know, that group of players should be doing a lot better than they are. Overall, I just think the challenges of the results, the challenges of the performance levels have meant that the owners have decided to sack Erik Ten Hag, and I don't think anybody will be truly shocked.
Well, Manchester United's poor Premier League form goes back much further than just this season. In fact, if you go back to the start of March, they are 12th in the table, below Fulham, Brentford, Crystal Palace and Bournemouth. And in that time, United have taken just 27 points from 21 games, which is just 1 point more than Everton. And in that time, the goal difference is -4.
You've got to think where the team is going. Now, if you actually look at it, it hasn't been a disaster for Manchester United with Erik Ten Hag. He's won 2 trophies in 2 years. But the style of football and how easy they are to play against, there was no way continuing like that, Manchester United were ever going to be in contention for a Premier League title or a Champions League title, which is where Manchester United should be. You know, they're one of the biggest clubs in the world. They've got no divine right to win, you know, those trophies every season, but they should be competing for them. As Manchester United, what we've seen over the last year or so should not be this poor and this easy to play against. And that is on Erik Ten Hag. He's coaching the team, he's setting the team up. It was so easy to get at this team's back four. They very rarely look like scoring a goal as well. I mean, and Man United should always be exciting. They should never be boring. They shouldn't be. You know, they should always leave you on the edge of your seat, whether you're a Man United fan or a Liverpool fan like myself. You always knew at United it was exciting. It was a brand of football. We just haven't seen that. We haven't seen that at all. So normally when you see a team who are good defensively and a little bit negative, they struggle to score, or vice versa. They're conceding lots of goals, but they're scoring lots of goals. Man United are neither. You know, if you actually look at the numbers in terms of goal difference over his tenure of sort of, what are we in now, 2.5 years? I mean, I think they've scored 11 more goals than they conceded in 2.5 years. This, you know, Man United, you know, should be one of the most exciting teams, not just in this country, but in European football, and they're a million miles away from that.
Former Manchester United captain Roy Keane posted on Instagram, "In good teams, coaches hold players accountable. In great teams, players hold players accountable." Manchester United had held talks with Thomas Frank in the summer. Earlier, the Brentford manager faced more questions about the possibility of taking over at Old Trafford.
I know in these big clubs there is, and especially Man United, there's massive expectations, but I also think there needs to be a little bit of, how can I say, reality check. With clearly on paper, three clubs are in a better place right now on top of the table. I think that's fair to say, City, Liverpool and Arsenal. So I've said many times, I'm very happy here. I think it's one of the best clubs in the world. What happens in the future, who knows, but I'm very happy here.
It's time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are Miguel Delaney, Chief Football Writer at The Independent, and John Cross, Chief Football Writer at The Mirror. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run through the back pages. No hiding place. Ten Hag finally axed after pushing club's faith to breaking point. United in talks with Amorim. That's the big development later in the day. Pain relief is what the Guardian say for Erik Ten Hag as Amorim closes in on the Old Trafford hot seat. They also talk about the Ballon d'Or, the big winners, Rodri and Bon Mati, but Real Madrid decide not to attend. In the Times, Ten Hag sacked by United, and more on that Real Madrid snub as Rodri wins the Ballon d'Or. And on the back page of The Mirror, Reds line up Lisbon line Amorim after Ten Hag is sacked, and Ballon War. That's my favourite of the headlines that we've got so far, gentlemen. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll start with that back page of your paper, The Telegraph. Miguel, no hiding place for Erik Ten Hag. I think we've said that a few times before, but finally this was the straw that broke the camel's back, the defeat to West Ham.
Yeah, and it's amazing too, given that, I mean, they say like a week is a long time in politics, but a day in Man United, what's that? But of course, we've essentially been waiting for this decision for months. I mean, really, they pretty much decided it before the cup final. But the issue, was the emotional momentum after that. And I think much more significantly, that they couldn't settle on a potential replacement. But now, after that long period where there's so much indecision, we've not just had his departure in one morning, but also on the brink, perhaps, of his replacement, which has moved rather drastically. But yeah, I suppose to pick up on your point as well, or the question, it's not just about the West Ham game, obviously, which is ironically one of their better performances. It's really an accumulation over, months going back into last season. And I mean, it's just hard to get away from the reality as well that once they're casting around for his replacements in the summer, although there's a lot to criticise Ten Hag for, how could he ever really have the sort of authority required to go on any sort of impressive run this season when that had happened? It was one reason the connection with the team broke, I think, but there were other reasons as well, to be fair.
Yeah, so the ironic thing, John, in this one is that while the seemingly inevitable sacking of Erik Ten Hag, we've been talking about this for many months, maybe even longer than that, took forever, United have moved very quickly onto their target, Ruben Amorim. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, it's a really interesting development, that, isn't it? I think you're right in what you say, that basically I do feel it's been a long, drawn out process. I must say, I don't actually think that they did take that decision in the summer. I actually think they kind of almost pulled the rug from under his feet, didn't they, by doing that review, which involved speaking to other candidates, and then basically clearly hadn't taken that decision before the cup final and decided to stick with him. And I actually admire United on that front, really, showing some loyalty. Maybe it was misjudged, who knows? And then the fans, I think the fans, the way that they've shown incredible loyalty to stick and get behind Ten Hag for this period actually is worth noting as well, because I think that is, that's pretty loyal from a fantastic fan base. And I think that shows them up in a really good light. And you'd like to think they'll get behind the next guy, Ruben Amorim, because he really is a very exciting coach. He's been obviously, much vaunted across Europe. It was definitely on Liverpool's radar. I think there was a period of time last season when he thought he might well have the Liverpool job in the bag and he could be the successor to Jurgen Klopp, and he's certainly been on Man City's radar. So the fact is that I think that Man United thought, do you know what, we're treading water here, and then basically let's go for a guy with an identity. He's got a real style of play. He often plays with three at the back. They're quite stylish to watch. I wouldn't say they're completely expansive and wonderfully open, wonderfully entertaining, but they are good to watch generally. They've won domestic trophies. They won the title, of course, but also they've got really good results in Europe. That must appeal, to them. They've sort of kind of had decent heavyweight scouts in European competition. So, I think United's results in Europe have been a particularly disappointing fact under Ten Hag. So I think Amorim really can sort of kind of fit that bill. But I think he speaks perfect English, so he will come in there with no problem. I think he improves players, develops players, works with players, and really sets out that stall. I mean, he quite often plays a 3-4-3 system. As I say, he has improved players, and I think United fans will be excited by this, by this appointment. It looks as if it's, really sort of moving at a pace which is exciting, I think, for United.
Yeah, moving at a pace. So Ruben Amorim has won 2 Portuguese titles, 3 League Cups in Portugal. Miguel, haven't Manchester United appointed this guy before, Erik Ten Hag, with his success in the Netherlands?
Well, I suppose there is one difference that Crossy's alluded to there, that Ten Hag was very much admired around Europe, but there wasn't a massive clamour for his appointment. And of course, there was that story that kind of was an undercurrent throughout his time at United, that Tottenham would have gone for him, but they were actually put off because they felt he had a lack of charisma. Whereas the difference with Amorim, as Crossy said there, Liverpool, there was a feeling last season that he was going to be the manager until I think there was a breakdown in terms. Obviously, an issue has been the release clause, which still might be an issue with United. And they did a U-turn and went, well, not a U-turn, but they went full in for Slot. And obviously, Manchester City have obviously been, they've looked at him as a potential successor to Guardiola if Guardiola does go this summer. And I mean, they're not the only major clubs who are looking at Amorim as their potential next coach. Barcelona, another. Bayern had a look. The release clause was off-putting for a lot in the window just gone, or the summer just gone, sorry. So I think that is a difference, and there's maybe potentially more excitement about it. But yeah, you are right, I suppose, and ultimately as well, it's still a leap from one of Europe's second-tier leagues to the one that is now, this was the most valuable and biggest in the world. And that's potentially a difficulty, but equally, it is someone that it would be a coup if United got him, just because so many clubs do like him.
So we're seeing a number of the papers coming up on screen, John. We just saw the Express targeting the front runner. Does it look like it will be Ruben Amorim, or is this still an interview stage for you? The Express focusing on the fact that the Portuguese is the front runner to take over from Ten Hag rather than just one of a number of a shortlist.
No, I think he heads up that shortlist, and I think the fact is that they're basically having conversations with it. I think Miguel's, spot on there. That basically, I think that there's a slight discrepancy, isn't there, over how much you pay if you're a Portuguese club to release him as compared to a sort of kind of an overseas club. And I think when you're getting down to details like that, I do think that suddenly you are aware that it's one man sort of heading the field, shall we say, really. I don't think it's a done deal yet. I do think he's the racing, favourite. I think all of the back pages in agreement there, and the front pages as well of pullouts basically suggesting, the fact is that he's plastered all over those. Basically, it says to me there's a real strength of feeling that it will be him. I completely agree with Miguel there in that basically it's such an interesting one, isn't it? Because he's not in a sort of an absolute first-rate league. He's not, a huge name in sort of kind of, player terms, if you like. It's not as if they've been able to get a Zidane or a Xavi or someone like that. But I do think in coaching terms, I think he's got such a high regard, massive reputation, and I do think it'll be something of a coup. Let's not forget that there was a time, whether it be Portuguese or out of Portuguese clubs, really kind of excited everyone. That was the Jose Mourinho template. And for about a decade, if you got anyone from a Portuguese club, then actually they were really, really exciting, and they kind of, would do the business. And that was a rich vein of, form. So maybe it's kind of a throwback to that, because I do think United fans will be excited by this guy. I think it would have been wrong to go for someone younger, a bit like like a McKenna or sort of a Carragher at this stage. I do think they need someone a little bit further down the line, just to sort of kind of, see that out. Gareth Southgate, I think would have been an excellent choice, bearing in mind what he's done with England. But, would that have convinced all the United fans? And furthermore, he wanted about a year out. So kind of, he felt he needed that break. So I think Amorim is the perfect choice. I do think it's an exciting one. And I do think, United fans, I think when they see him ensconced and when they get to know his brand of football, if you haven't already, if you've played them in sort of kind of seen games in European competition, Sporting are really exciting to watch. They're very well organised, incredibly well structured, really well coached. The biggest thing about Ten Hag was that lack of identity, wasn't it? That lack of approach. And I think that is something that Amorim will quickly put right, I feel.
Yeah. So that is the new guy that we think looks likely at this stage anyway with Manchester United's development. If we look at the Times, the headline is so stark. When Manchester United make a managerial change, you don't need plays on words. Ten Hag sacked by United, Miguel. What do you think was the moment? Because the fact that they're already in talks with Ruben Amorim suggests that this was coming down the track already. What do you think was the moment that made the board go, we need to make a change?
I think it was pretty close 3 weeks ago. In fact, it's still surprising they didn't make that decision in the, what ended up being a 7-hour meeting. And there was potentially a case there where it was almost too many influential voices, because we all know the size of this United hierarchy. I think it was still a case that they weren't completely sure on a successor or what they were going to do. But I think from pretty much that point, they knew they eventually had to act. It was a case of how bad it's got. I think there is a slight irony, actually, that, the West Ham game was one of the better performances, but you could have no faith that it was coming together. And as we both said tonight, this is just something that's been rumbling on for months. They really, I mean, on a deeper level, they knew they eventually had to change. It was just a case of when and how, rather than actually making that key decision, because there was no sign of improvement.
Yeah. How does the sacking, do you think, reflect on Jim Ratcliffe? John?
I think it's. Oh, sorry, Miguel. I just feel it's. I think actually it reflects rather badly in. I think that probably there was some indecision, if I'm honest. I mean, basically, he's fairly new to running a football club. He's been successful in every other aspect of his business life and sporting life. And I think it shows up perhaps some indecision there. I actually think, in fairness to them, they came in midway through the season, probably wanted to give him every chance. We shouldn't overlook just what an achievement it is to win domestic trophies. against the backdrop of other clubs not achieving as much. But you are judged by at United, aren't you, by Champions League football and finishing in the Champions League places and being, you know, one of the big guns in European competitions. So I think that's where they fell short, really. But that whole summer review felt so awkward to me that basically they're actually talking to other candidates and haven't made up their minds. And he's a thoroughly nice man, actually, Ten Hag. You know, I've sort of had the pleasure of spending a little bit of time with him at a couple of dinners relatively recently. He's a really good guy. And the United fans realise that, appreciate that. He wants to do well. It just hasn't, you know, the signings haven't particularly worked. I don't think he's stamped an authority and identity on it. I think it looks a bit messy. I mean, he'll be complaining, you know, won't he, about sort of kind of he was robbed of a result yesterday by a shocking penalty decision, which went against him. So, you know, things like that will sort of kind of, you know, grate against him, really. But I think he's, you know, he was so determined to succeed. That was the thing that sort of shone through to me. And that will be the biggest disappointment, really. But I do think United deserves some credit by actually trying to give him every opportunity. Having said that, you've almost wasted 9 games. You spent a lot of money on players who probably the manager would favour. So, you know, you're treading water, and you know, you're bringing in Amorim, and he's almost, you know, sort of kind of trying to play catch up on the season, really, to salvage the season, getting the Champions League.
Miguel, let's have a quick look at the Guardian back page. Pain relief, Manchester United finally putting Erik ten Hag out of his misery. They describe his tenure as miserable and messy. How do you think we'll remember Erik ten Hag in years to come?
I mean, to be fair to Ten Hag, ultimately, he's actually one of United's most successful modern coaches, given that he won 2 trophies. That shouldn't be overlooked. You can always point to that. I suppose, as Crossy's reference there, that at the same time could be considered a sign of United's decline, that this was the standard now, because really for United, domestic trophies should only be the bonuses. They are about leagues and Champions Leagues. And the reality was, although that will look good on Ten Hag's historic record, something again he can always take pride in, they were further away than ever than the league and getting back to the Champions League. I mean, look at the league table today. Look at all these stats about kind of, you know, worst possible runs from or worst possible starts to the season. I mean, last year the FA Cup really, it came out of one game that was an outlier in terms of the entire season. There's also been kind of a lot of discussion about how much the tactics on the day were even his. And yeah, he wanted to go toe-to-toe with City, but there was a discussion that actually among the staff that they should go defensive instead, which did win the day. And again, that was so out of kilter with the rest of the season, which was really just a year of pretty dismal football. I mean, think back even to September and some of those defeats at home to the likes of Brighton. And really, when you look back, despite those 2 trophies, in 2.5 years, it still feels like it was only really, 3 or 4 months when it looked like the Erik ten Hag's United could be something special. That was really that spell from December to the League Cup final over Newcastle United, the one point where they're playing exciting, fast football, and it was something you would think that Ten Hag has an ideal. But outside of that, there was nothing really close to that.